Christina. Need my glasses, hang on. Evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you all here at the RSA in the Great Room, and all those I know that are listening online as well to this very special event with our very special speaker this evening. As some people know, we have a big birthday at the RSA coming up. End of this month, we turn 270. And as part of that year of celebration, we have a theme running through all year of courage. We've lined up over the course of this year a whole range of public speakers to our stages to talk about acting with courage and indeed with compassion and with conviction to drive forward the social change that's never been more needed than just at the moment, as we all know. Mold breakers, trailblazers, change makers, as we call them at the RSA, all seeking to regenerate society, companies, and of course, the planet more broadly in communities right around the world. And frankly, I couldn't think of anyone globally who more clearly demonstrates that courage and that optimism in their work than tonight's speaker, Dame Christiana Figueres. It's for that reason we're doubly blessed this evening in having Christiana not just deliver a speech, but also to take delivery of this year's RSA Albert Medal. For those who don't know, the Albert Medal was first awarded in 1864. It's awarded annually to figures to recognize their outstanding contribution and innovation in enabling people, places, and planet to thrive in harmony. Illustrious, tremendous list of past recipients, including Marie Curie and Stephen Hawking. But moving on, let me just say the panel, our diverse panel, were united in their recommendation for the award this year to Christiana, an internationally recognized leader on global climate and nature change, someone rightly recognized as having forged a whole new approach and brand of collaborative diplomacy and action, culminating in the historic Paris Agreement of 2015, a landmark in the climate change movement. Since then, Christiana has continued to provide and promote and accelerate the global response to climate change. She's a founding partner of Global Optimism. She's co-presenter of the hugely popular climate podcast, Outrage and Optimism, and co-author of The Future We Choose, the Stubborn Optimist's Guide to the Climate Crisis. So tonight, we come together to celebrate and present Christiana with the 2023 Albert Medal in recognition of her exceptional leadership and creativity over many years throughout her career, from the Paris Agreement right through to her current work around biodiversity, conservation, and the reconnection with nature, all issues very close to our own heart here at the RSA. So Christiana, huge congratulations. It's my massive pleasure to welcome you and to award to you not just the Albert Medal, but also Honorary Life Fellowship of the RSA. Please join me in welcoming and thanking Christiana Figueres.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very beautiful.
Welcome. We're looking just there.
Thank you, Andy.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Andy. And I have to say, when you reach the old age of 68, one of the wonderful things about this incredible medal is that it was instituted way before my birth. because there are more and more things that we're not. And I keep on having to say, yes, well, in last century, because most of my life is in the last century. So I'm very glad that this doesn't, this takes me way farther and makes me feel much younger than I actually am. So thank you so much. You have all, in case you didn't know, Andy has already reminded us that the RSA is celebrating its 270th anniversary this year. Quite fantastic. And I was very taken when I learned that the choice that was made for this year's public program is the topic of courage. And I asked Andy just a few minutes ago, why courage? And he says, because it's sorely needed, which I think is absolutely the right answer. And I agree with you, Andy. I think it's a very wise choice to call for increasing courage, because I think we all agree that it is critical to the moment that we're living. And sadly, I think we can all agree that it is rare in these times. So I thought tonight I would invite you into a little exploration of why is it so rare? And there are many reasons for that, but I wanted to focus perhaps on what I think is the fundamental reason for the rarity of courage, and that is that we are actually living between two realities. I will frame my remarks, because otherwise my colleague sitting right here in the front would fire me immediately. So I will frame my remarks within the context of climate change, which is what I have devoted my life to. But I hope that in your listening, you can apply what I will be sharing with you to any other challenge that could be a global challenge, of which we have many in the poly-crisis that we're living, or in fact to a professional or even a personal challenge, because it is very applicable. So within the climate framework, we are clearly living and experiencing what I would call reality number one, which is the most evident to most people. And that is a reality that has many people, if not most people, thinking that it is by now completely impossible to address climate change in any way, shape, or form. And I don't blame them for that conclusion, because the fact is there are some very, very hard facts that substantiate that. The first being that last year, to those who follow the topic, was the first year that the temperature ceiling, not the goal, but the temperature ceiling of 1.5 degrees centigrade, which scientists have set as the ceiling above which it will be very difficult for humans to carry on our life here in this planet, let alone the rest of nature. But that ceiling, 1.5, was breached last year as an average across the year. That is extremely worrisome. It does not mean that it is breached forever or permanently. That's the little ray of light, but it was breached last year, and sooner than most scientists thought. That, of course, means that we experienced and continue to experience extreme heat conditions all over the world, that ecosystems and people are under unprecedented stress, that there's more and more vulnerability in every single disaster that we see, that ecosystems are dangerously close to tipping points, and the whole litany of the environmental crisis that we're living. Needn't go into more detail. We're also at the same time living in the prep time for what I would call diplomatically an ominous US election. And 1/2 of the world population is actually going to their respective poles this year, with very worrisome trends in most, if not all, countries. We're also experiencing wars, not just in the Middle East and in the Ukraine, but let's not forget the Darfur region in the Sudan and many other regions of the world. And of course, the global economy is extremely brittle, and the litany continues. I don't have to complete the list because we would be here until the day after tomorrow. But you get the picture. Those who have decided, especially young people, that it's all over, that their only sentiment here can be doom and gloom, are actually pretty justified. Now, that reality, that looms so great that it most often steals the light away from the other reality that we're also living, but that is less evident to people. So let's call that reality number 2. And that is that we are actually witnessing, have been witnessing already for several years, exponential progress definitely in solar and wind energy technologies, and increasingly in everything to do with batteries, hydrogen, and electric vehicles coming up the exponential curve, as I have been taught by my colleagues. Now, what is fascinating to me is that in the financial sector, if you've been following that discussion, that is under unbelievable war from the political extreme right in the United States, the financial sector that had already been moving over toward much more responsible investment under the rubric of ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. And so they were doing ESG investment, ESG lending, they sort of knew where they were going. Well, now, in order to protect themselves from the political backlash, they've changed the title, and now they're doing transition investing. Not at all to do with ESG. ESG title is out. It's exactly the same thing. They've just put a different name, protecting themselves from the political and legal backlash. The good news is they stay the course because they know that that is the safer investment route. And I would add to the good news, resilient communities the world over that at local level are really moving forward into very creative initiatives that are strengthening their adaptation and their resilience to the new conditions that we have. And RSA has quite a few initiatives that fall into that bucket, but they're joined by millions of initiatives all over the world of every size, shape, and structure imaginable. And I get most of my hope from the fact that nature is stressed, but still resilient. We only hear about the stressed, but it is still resilient, at least part of it. It is not that all of nature is actually so stressed that it would not be able to come back to its resilience. And the part of me that is in huge pain over what we're doing to nature needed to go a couple of weeks ago underwater in Indonesia to see the most magnificent corals that I have ever seen in full bloom, in full growth, the most beautiful gardens that I have ever seen. And I go to every botanical garden in any country that I ever go to, but never have I seen the gardens that I saw underwater. And I just came up from that diving experience so replenished in thinking, at least here, nature is still with us, and she is still resilient. And there is an increasing recognition of policy that it is important to bolster that resilience. One case in point is the new EU law that would obligate all EU countries, sadly not the UK, to restore 20% of land and sea by 2030 and moving to 90% by 2050. So it's interesting because I would argue we probably always have, even in the last century, but certainly now and probably in the next century, we will always live between realities or in the transition between realities, but definitely right now we're living between those two realities with evidence, proof of both of them coexisting. So without minimizing, and I would never want to do that, the unprecedented threat of climate change, what we need to understand about those two realities is that the threatening reality, in this case what I have just described, but applied to any other situation, the threatening reality always looms larger for us, whether it is factually true or not. But it always looms larger, in part because out of our primitive survival purposes, we are hardwired to look toward the threat. That's how we survived. Over centuries, our reptilian brain has honed 3 different reactions to any threat, and you will easily recognize them. The first is, of course, fight. And we can imagine, some ancestor of ours fighting against the lion. But we can also recognize how many people who are in the climate space or in any other challenge, whose reaction to the threat is to fight, to be in anger, to blame, to accuse, to point a blaming finger, and to go into all kinds of iterations of the othering symptom. We can, just as I described that, I am sure you're all going to, yeah, I know this person always goes into fight mode. That person always goes into fight mode. Okay, but I would also invite us to realize that all of us inhabit that mental space, at least occasionally. And the issue with that is that it rarely attains the desired change, and certainly not one that endures, which is what we need, because not only does it alienate the other people who we're blaming and causing blaming fingers at, or shaking blaming fingers at, it's exhausting to us. Try to be in anger and fight mode, for an extended period of time. It is completely exhausting. So reaction number 2 that all of us also have is the freeze mode, which is exactly the opposite of this one. So fight, freeze. And I must sadly share with you that many of my climate community members who I have worked with or who I am meeting now are in complete overwhelm mode. Complete overwhelm mode, because the news is so terrible. And the overwhelm puts them into burnout and paralyzes them. So that I understand it, especially for those who have been many years at the hard work, but the problem with it is that it paralyzes our agency. You pull the covers over your head, you cannot engage. And so the change that you want to see, the change for which you've given your life, or at least some years, in my case, most of my life, never occurs because you're not able to engage with it. So fight doesn't work, freeze doesn't work. The third one that you're all expecting is flight. Well, that happens to be, I think, the more popular one because it's the easiest one. It's the easiest one because we can pay lip service to climate or to any other disaster, to peace in the world, to ecosystem destruction. Oh, yeah, it's terrible. Turn the page. Who would like chocolate cake? Don't we all do that? We pay lip service. We pretend like it's really important. We pretend like we really care. And in fact, when you really look at it, there is a huge part of us that is distracted, if not indifferent. The problem with that one is that it doesn't lead to any behavioral change. It doesn't lead to any policy change. It feeds unbounded consumerism writ large, and it just feeds the threat that we're trying to do something about. So I'm not trying to say that any one of us or any of my friends stay permanently in any of those mental states, because the fact is we all dip into them, one or the other, depending on the day, the circumstance, the person that we're dealing with, talking to, which side of the bed we fell out of. But what they all have in common is they're absolutely ineffective in bringing about the change that we so sorely need. So, is there another path? Yes, it is the path of courage. That is the path that the RSA has chosen as our collective inspiration for this year. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, I wonder if everybody agrees to what courage is. Do I interpret courage the way everybody else does? So the easiest way to find that out is to go to the dictionary. Dictionaries still exist, even if Ms. Google is here. And the dictionary says, and I quote, that courage is the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person, an organization, a nation, or a society to face difficulty, danger, pain, fear, threat, and not be annihilated by it. End of quote. And I add, rather emboldened by it. Because that is what we are called for. It is as simple and as challenging as making a conscious choice of not turning away from the threat, not ignoring it, but rather metabolizing it. Metabolizing the understanding of the threat or the danger into an effective response guided by a honed quality of mind. And so what are those characteristics of that quality of mind? Well, many, but let me just pull out a few. I am known for a phrase called stubborn optimism, so let me pick out the stubborn. To me, what that actually means is gritty determination. It means if a door closes, you look for a window. If that window closes, you look for another window. If that window closes, you look for the slit under the door. No barrier that comes up can be powerful enough for us to give up because the consequences are too grave. So it's about determined, gritty, stick to it resilience no matter what. It is also about openness to others. It is also about being open to other people's opinions, whether we agree to them or not, listen to them, try to figure out what is positive there, to other people's ways of working. I have a particular way of working, my colleagues have different ways of working, and because we work together, it has a better impact. And of course, it is about optimism, and to us, optimism is not naive. It doesn't mean, okay, somebody was going to take care of it. No, for us, optimism is actually the input that you consciously and intentionally bring to any challenge. Because if you don't, there is no chance that you will be able to vanquish that challenge. And my friends, I will use the L word because it's not a word that we tend to use much, and I am slowly coming to the firm conviction that it is under all of this. It underpins all of this. And the L word is love. It is about love for self, yes. We were taught not to do that, but I don't agree with that anymore. It's about love of self, love of others, love of nature, and love of everything that is around us right now. And it's not very far from courage, since the etymological origin of courage is the Latin word cor, which is heart. And as we put all of these characteristics of that quality of mind together, it does us well to remember that you don't have to have a little calling card, that says I'm the CEO, or I sit in the C-suite, or I'm the MD, or you don't have to be a leader, a positional leader in your organization or even in your family by job description or anything else to be able to lead with those qualities of mind, because that is where humanity really is at its strongest, independently of the work that we're doing or the challenge that we have. And in fact, I would even argue you don't even have to officially work on climate to make a difference in the world by deploying those qualities of mind. I would argue to you that every single person in this room has agency. And just as in an ecosystem, every part is invaluable, so is every person. Let's just think about the fact that pollination is crucial to every single plant species and depends largely on bees or other insects. And every bee, in case you have looked at what a bee does, she is focused on one thing, collecting the nectar that she needs. Now, she's not thinking that in so doing, she is actually contributing individually to the collective task of pollination and of survival of that species. But without her collecting the nectar, there would be no fruits, no flowers, and there would be no future for most ecosystems. And so it is that for us humans, the question is, how do I, as an individual, show up with those critical characteristics of courage to each decision, to each moment, to each conversation, and in so doing, contribute to the reality that I want. I really rejoice in the fact that the vision of the RSA, how convenient for me, is a world where everyone can fulfill their potential and contribute to a more resilient, rebalanced, and regenerative future. That, my friends, cannot be done without courage. It just can't be done without the courage. We are alive now at a moment in human history that is completely unique, unprecedented, and we don't know what is going to happen in the future. But if we compare it to where we were, this is an unprecedented moment. And we're living definitely with more than one reality, and with the potential that one of those realities will crowd out the other one, for sure, either to the detriment or to the betterment of all nature, including humanity. So, dear friends, I invite you to consciously choose the reality that you want for yourself, that you want for your loved ones, that you want for your environment, that you want for your descendants, and then intentionally show up for that consistently and permanently. What we choose today will become the dominant reality in a world of imminent tipping points. Tipping points in the Earth system for sure, but also, I would argue, tipping points in human society. And we humans will tip the balance no matter what. So we might as well tip thoughtfully. Thanks.
Thank you, Christiana. Absolutely wonderful lecture. So much in there.
Your topic. That was easy.
I know, but you rose to the challenge. More than. So much for us to discuss, and we'll get the audience very quickly, so please get prepared with your questions, and online as well. We'll pick up as many as we can. But just to kick off, courage. Let's take courage. I want to know where your personal courage has come from. I remember you telling me this story when we were discussing for our journal how you went from, you know, on the climate agenda, the depths of despair just ahead of the Paris Agreement, right through to that moment of triumph. And I want to know what got you through that moment.
Yeah, I've been very public, so no beans being undutifully spilled tonight. That when I took over the job of leading the international climate negotiations, it was 6 months after the Paris debacle, in case anybody, the Copenhagen debacle, in case anybody remembers Copenhagen. At the end of 2009, I and maybe many people here are Copenhagen survivors. It was the most terrible experience that I have ever been in. And at my first, I think this is what you're pointing to, at my first press conference, some journalist asked me, so Ms. Figueres, I was newly minted, right? I hadn't even barely been to my office yet. And he goes, because I remember it was a he, so Ms. Figueres, do you think a global agreement would ever be possible? And before my brain could engage, my mouth went, not in my lifetime. And I thought, did I just say that? And I could see my colleagues, right, in the comms unit just wanting to completely kill their new boss, right? Who invited this woman to be our boss? But what I realized is I was really speaking the mood of the time. There was such despondency, there was complete doom and gloom about ever being able to reach a global agreement. And I was just speaking that. And by the time I left the room, I thought, right, I'm going to prove myself wrong. Because if I act out of that mindset, out of that mental quality, that there is no way that we will ever get a global agreement, we probably never will. And so I walked out of the room, and before I got to my office, I had made my promise that I would change that. That I would first change my attitude and then bring my colleagues around, and then governments, try to change the opinion of governments, and then private sector and finance and everybody else around to a can-do attitude without ever knowing what we were going to do. Just let's first change the attitude and then see what is possible. And I've been stubborn about that ever since.
You have?
Yeah.
I know this to be true. And it's worked. And it's worked.
Yeah.
You mentioned that at the very end.
Not without difficulties, but yes, it works.
Well, last time
it's not a walk in the park, is what I'm saying.
No, I know that. I know that. But I remember last time we spoke at that interview, you expressed real optimism actually on climate. Now, you were very pessimistic, though, on nature. You said we're still way off on nature. Could you elaborate on that point a bit for the audience? I'm sure they'd be fascinated by it.
We are way off, which is why every time that I have the opportunity to go and see nature where it is still resilient and vibrating, I do that because I need that input, right? I need that input because the science says and the reports say that we are way behind on nature, on restoring nature, on certainly on regenerating, because if you think about it, what the destruction that we have caused on nature requires 3 efforts on our part. First is to reduce or relieve the pressure that we have put. And in the best of all cases, most organizations, companies, et cetera, are doing that. That's okay, but it's not enough. The second, after reducing the input, the pressure on it, is actually to be able to restore the damage, and that requires very often human intervention because we have caused so much, and then regenerate so that nature can rescue the resilience that it originally had. And most efforts are not doing that. They're still stuck on the first. The restoring and regenerating is really only by those who are very much in the front lines. And to me, the critical handbrake on that is we have not figured out what the financial model is for that.
Yeah.
We have figured out a financial model for example, renewable energy, which is the reason why renewable energy is now so competitive. It is so competitive as a technology. It has so many attributes that make it, way, way, way more interesting than the incumbent technologies. But fundamentally, because we have a financial model and a lot has been invested into the advance of the renewable energies, at least wind and solar. And that is not the case in nature. We're still trying to figure out how do we develop a financial model for that, because economists, how many economists are there in the room?
You knew that already.
So economists have to do their job in giving a value to the services of nature. We have not given that a value. We just assume that nature will forever give us those services, whether that is carbon sequestration or protection of aquifers or any other service, production of oxygen, any other service that nature gives us, and we have not valued that. We have value zero in this economic reality that we live in. So until my friends over here figure that out, and I really think it has to be done quite urgently, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to develop a financial model and a business flow for restoring nature. And conversely, as soon as those services have a value, that goes very quickly, because there is much interest in doing so. But right now, it is philanthropic money only that can go into that money, into that area.
We are working on just this problem.
Good.
At the RSA. And
the result is tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning?
There are some ideas out there, actually. That, you and I have discussed them, that things that could be done radically different. I mean, Partha Dasgupta, who actually was sat in this chair and I was sat in that one 6 months ago, his report had some fantastic ideas about what might
absolutely.
be done. Now, too little of that is happening, and that is the reality. We've got the audience in a minute. Last question from me, though, which is, you spoke eloquently, beautifully as ever, about this, pick your reality. Which reality do you want? But the truth is, many people in society, including politicians, can't imagine that other reality.
I know.
They can't see the costs of what might come down the track. How do we get them to reimagine both this terrible reality that we risk if we don't act, and this much better reality that we could realize if we did?
Well, when I had the task of getting all countries of the world to agree to a legally binding text, I locked the doors and said, nobody goes to the bathroom, nobody eats, nobody sleeps until you all sign. So that's one. That's one way of doing it. But it really is, it's very sad, Andy, that the short-term political cycle does not allow for these politicians to act, even if they think long-term. It doesn't allow them to act long-term. And that's not to say that I am against democracy. It is to say that democracy itself ought to be serving the well-being of humanity and of the planet. And right now, it's not. And that's why I'm so concerned about the fact that there are so many elections this year, half the world's population going to the polls, because they're locked in a system that almost forces them and their so-called leaders to look just 3, 4, sometimes 6 years down the line, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it really is the issue of short and long term.
Let's get the audience. I'm sure there's going to be a load of questions for you from there. Who'd like to? We'll start just here.
Thank you for that wonderful speech, and you're so inspiring. It's a pleasure to be here to listen to you. You were talking about the sort of dire state of global politics. I feel quite lucky. I live in Brighton. We have Caroline Lucas, the Green MP, who is brilliant on so many matters. I wondered who does inspire you out there in the world, either politicians or people that you think are doing really good work that we should be following and applauding.
You know, I get that question with certain frequency, and my tendency always there is not to pick names that we would have heard of, but rather to think especially of so many women who are on the front lines. Nobody has ever heard of them. There they are, you know, a woman with 5 children, no man in sight, dealing with the atrocities of drought, having to feed her children. Those are the heroes. Those are the real heroes, right? Those are the ones that I go like, okay, I'm gonna work for that. Because the other is, I don't know, it's so movable maybe, it's so non-permanent. Now there's this political leader, now there's that political leader. I mean, I am full of admiration and inspiration by especially women who are standing up to the challenges day in and day out, and do not give up because their children depend on them. That's what I think is heroic behavior.
Thank you, Christiana. Stephen.
Thank you so much. So nice to see you again, and wonderful. Thank you for this wonderful expose. Obviously, I'm on the board of the World Resources Institute, and also you know them very well. And we're just back from India, where we had fantastic 10 days of doing a deep dive into India. But one of the issues that we discuss is health, because we always talk about the climate emergency. We talk about nature, which is so resilient, but health is not resilient. Nature is resilient, and nature will survive.
Human health is what you're talking about.
Human health.
Yes.
Human health, we will not survive if we continue like we do. So maybe you can add something on your perspective. I'm now working also with the Pasteur Institute, and they're also very, very interested in that whole context of climate and health.
Yeah, one thing that we do extraordinarily badly in the climate world is that we make it seem as though this is something that is over there, doesn't have anything to do with us. And, you know, we talk about, like she just did up here on the podium, about, you know, 1.5 degrees as though, you know, that were something that affects me as a human. And so, you know, mea culpa, because the fact is, if you forget about climate and you talk about human health, now you're talking about something that every mother and father is really going to worry about, because we all worry about the health of our children. And the fact, for example, that here in London, Ella died because of pollution. Mm-hmm. And that has now been proven. That is not just a compelling story, that is evidence of crime. And that just makes the whole thing so much more immediate to me. So I completely agree with you that the more that we can untattoo climate from our forehead and talk about its effects on humans, health, food, another one, right there, water availability, Those are issues that are completely dependent on whatever we do on climate at a mega level, but completely within my sphere of concern.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely agree with you that that ought to be best practice, because otherwise we're still in la la land. Yeah, so yes, agree.
That's about making the planetary issues local.
Yes. Humanizing.
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 And I take a question online. Here's a good one. Christiana, how do we manage the fear that fuels climate conspiracy theorists?
Is it fear? I'm actually not sure that it's fear. I have deep respect for fear because I share fear. And I share pain and I share grief. And I'm probably the UN leader who has most track record for most streaming tears in front of all TV cameras, et cetera, et cetera. And it's because of the pain. It's because of the fear of what could happen. So I am very much there, and I have huge respect for those people who can get in touch with the fear. I have more respect for those people than for those who ignore the fear that is at the bottom of our heart. I don't think that those people go to conspiracy theories. I think that people who can really sense the fear go into either the fight because of the fear or the freeze mode because they feel so overwhelmed. And for those people, I really stretch my hand out because they are very important soldiers in this battle, because they can stand in the fear. Fear for me is not a weakness. Fear is a strength. Mm-hmm. And if we can see that pain and fear and grief is what gives us strength, that we can choose to take all of that and, as I said, metabolize that, use it as fertilizer, if you will, to strengthen our resolve and our engagement with that, that is actually a very powerful fuel. I don't think that people who do conspiracy theories are overwhelmed by fear.
Thank you, Christiana. Back there.
Christiana, Paul Clements Hunter, former UN colleague of yours. Look, it plays to your point on courage. If you go back to 97, when Michael Zemet-Cotillard and the late Christine Zoom-Keller and the team and governments delivered the Kyoto Protocol, if you then leap what I think will be 27 or 28 years this December, do you feel that the financial markets, and particularly the large global asset owners, the biggest pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, lacked the courage to pick up what was delivered at Kyoto in terms of the clean development mechanism, joint implementation, all those marvelous things which for the first time connected the UN, I think, to the power of markets. So where is the courage of the financial system, and particularly the long-term investors who, control those pools of deep assets?
May I answer the question, but first tell a funny story?
Yeah, please.
So I was in Kyoto in 1997. When you mentioned the date, I went like Kyoto 1997. I was immediately there, December 1997. And the one thing that most of us remember most about that COP is that, God bless them, the Japanese organizers had not, gotten the memo that these UN negotiations never finish on time. And so they had prepared for a negotiation that finished on time. And I have no idea why they thought there would be less people there at the end rather than, more. In any event, they ran out of food exactly, at midnight of the date in which we were supposed to finish, which of course was 2.5 days earlier than what we actually finished. And the amazing thing to me is that they didn't run out of sake. And I remember distinctly that for the last 2 days and nights, because those were the days in which we went, work day and night. We hopefully don't do that anymore. But everybody was like on a sake high. And so it's amazing that we ever got the Kyoto Protocol. But I just met 2 days ago a sake expert who told me that sake and tequila are the only two alcohols who actually are real uppers, that all the rest of them are downers. And I'm like, that explains the mystery to me. Thank you for telling me so many years later. So, yeah, I think we have to thank the sake for the Kyoto Protocol. Now, getting back to your question, I think there's some progress. I do think that there is some progress, and not enough, not at scale, not quickly enough. But, go back to my friend here. The financial sector is still obeying the economic paradigm that is at the basis of the capitalist system. That's what they're still doing. And until the economic paradigm can not disappear, but be complemented to give value to that which is really, really important to our survival now, it is going to be difficult for them to go to scale in the investments that we need them to do so. They will go to scale, and they already are moving pretty quickly, at least recently, into everything to do with energy because it's profitable. But it's very difficult to ask them to do things that are not profitable because that's not the way they work. And so to me, it's not, and some of them are really trying and they're eking out, to try to figure out, well, how, do all my investors really need double digit, or can I go down to 1 digit? Can I go down to 4%? Can I, 3%, 2%? And they're retrying. The whole industry that is called impact investment is really, really trying to figure out how do they move that needle. But it's not mainstream. And it's not going to really move the big needle. They're moving the little needle. It's not going to move the big needle until it's mainstream. And that is not going to happen until we have a value that is concomitant with the value of natural services to the survival of human beings and of the rest of nature. So I wouldn't even blame the financial system. I blame my friend.
Thank you, Christiana. I see one more question online and then one more in the room, because we're already over time. I know that you've... this one, you've done financial services. This asks, what can the tech sector, which is even deeper pocketed now than finance, do to expedite the emergencies you've spoken about? What more can it do?
A lot. They can do a lot, and they are doing a lot. I would say it's actually the improvements of the tech sector that have led to the exponential growth of wind and energy, and increasingly batteries, and increasingly EVs. And I'm actually pretty excited about everything that is beginning to mushroom up about what AI can do on climate change in terms of total revamping of efficiency of energy. So once you marry renewable energy, with efficiency of energy, and all of that actually with smart grids and optimization of supply and demand and double lane batteries so that the battery of your car can be hooked up to your house, and when you're not using your car, you can use the renewable energy laden battery in your car to light your house, et cetera, et cetera. All of that has to do with AI and high tech, and that's very exciting. That is very exciting. And I know that AI has a whole bunch of other issues, you know, governance issues and moral issues and all of that. I'm not blind to that. And that needs to be regulated or dealt with some way. But that it holds a huge potential to accelerate solutions on climate change or to accelerate the impact of current solutions on climate, I think is irrefutable.
Wonderful. Last question here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lydia Stevens, and I'm a leadership coach, and I've worked a lot in climate and biodiversity, and I've followed your work. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. I wonder about courage and the gut, and how you have courage, and if you ever sort of were so in your head that you didn't really feel that courage, that, like you mentioned earlier, you were arriving at a meeting and just said the first thing that came out of your mouth and didn't stop and think.
That was the only time that ever happened to me.
So what would you recommend to others in order to have that embodied courage?
Embodied courage, I like that phrase. Pausing. And that's really difficult for me because I'm very much of a reactive person, and I walk very fast, and I react very fast, and that is a life lesson for me, is to be able to recognize what the input is, whatever, it's a conversation, it's something that happened, whatever the input is on the outside world, and recognize my instinctual impulse, how am I going to react, and hold it. Just hold it for a minute and ask myself, is this what I'm going to say or do or think? Is it the highest value response? Or can I shift? All of this is in the pause. Can I shift to a response that is not reactive, that is more thoughtful, and that is of higher value in terms of more loving, more responsible, certainly less accusatory, less doubtful, and more calling forth the highest expression of the other person. How do I invite that? How do I stand into my highest expression in a way that invites the stepping forth of the highest expression of the other person? And that's, I can see it as a whole bunch of filters. And you don't normally have 5 minutes to think about this. And sometimes it takes not 5, but 10. What I have noticed over time is that it takes less and less time because the muscle gets stronger and it becomes more of a way of responding. So neurolinguistic programming explains why this is so, because we have honed our reptilian brain, as I said, to react in certain ways, and that's what we fall into instinctually. And if we are more thoughtful about it, we can train ourselves to not react, but to respond differently. What I think is every single time, amazing about that is that it is transformative to the conversation that you're in. And it is transformative to the action that you're taking. And it's not about, you know, I don't know, it's not about a huge issue. It's not about a huge display of anything. It's about very quickly digging in, and then coming out with your highest self. It's pretty amazing. Highly recommended.
Fantastic. Final question. Even better final answer. Wonderful. We'll have to draw things to a close because time is more than up. So let me just thank everyone online in the room for coming along and for your fantastic questions. I'm sure there's lots more you have. You may be able to put them to Christiana after this. If you're an RSA fellow, the conversation can continue on our digital platform, Circle. For those that aren't fellows, you can find out all that we're up to online with our Design for Life program. Economists might well be part of the problem, Christiana.
Only a part.
But here's the key bit.
Okay.
We are intent in being part of the solution here at the RSA.
All right.
And our program interventions and Design for Life are doing just that. We can talk to you much more about that, working with you as fellows, as friends, as partners, and of course with Christiana herself. Now, downstairs, below us in the Benjamin Franklin room, we now have some drinks. Even better news.
Below is usually down. I mean, I'm glad to know it's also here.
Thank you, Christiana. Below is definitely down. And not only other drinks, we have loads of sake and tequila down to cheer us all up. And last but by no means least, please join me as ever in both congratulating and thanking the 2023 Albert Medalist and our wonderful, inspiring, uplifting speaker this evening, Christiana Figueres.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, wonderful, amazing.
Thank you.
As ever.